Hi, my name is Melissa Cockrell. I'm the oldest of four children. Unfortunately, we did live in poverty for most of my childhood. There were times where family would kind of help out a little bit and pay some of our bills, but for the most part, we didn't have electricity, we didn't have hot water, we didn't have food even. Both of my parents were heavily addicted to drugs and alcohol. So any amount of money that came in, whether it be from Social Security checks for my siblings who have disabilities, or from food stamps, things like that, all went to feed their addiction. So we, went to school regularly, which was good because that was the way that we at least got one meal a day. As time went on, we actually lived back with our parents at this time, so we came back. Wasn't long after that CPS actually started coming around again, and a lot of it is because we again were going to school with ill-fitting clothing or not eating. We were dirty, we had lice, we were stealing food from the cafeteria, we were absent a lot, things like that. But also the next step was that they started noticing bruises and started noticing that we got quieter over time. As we got older, the abuse switched, more from, although they were still both very addicted, now we were enduring physical abuse at that time as well. At that point in Illinois, we only had the one CPS case open, whereas in Indiana, we had two at that point. Few years went on, the abuse continued, the addictions got worse, their drug of choices got worse. I actually stopped going to school because I had to make sure that my three younger siblings were taken care of. I had to make sure that they got up every day, took their medications, got on the bus, got to school. That way I knew they were at least getting one meal a day, and then getting back home and getting safely back to the house. So because where we lived was heavy in gang violence and drugs and things of that nature. So I actually got in a lot of trouble, believe it or not, for being absent a lot because I had to make sure that my siblings were taken care of. And actually my youngest sister at the time was still a baby, so she wasn't even in school. But I just had to be there to make sure she was safe and taken care of, because especially in the winter time, we didn't have heat. Then CPS started coming around again, and at this point I was about 12 or 13. And some extended family of ours kind of got wind of this and reached out to my biological parents and said, why don't we take her, because they thought that I was a problem child. Why don't we take her, we'll bring her to Michigan, and, at the end of the school year, we'll bring her back, and, hopefully things are back on track. At the age of 5 years old, my parents had told me that, my three younger siblings had SSI checks that they were receiving monthly, and that was helping offset some cost of bills, but I was actually not bringing in any money. So their idea was that I would stay with the neighbor, and the neighbor would pay a bill or two or provide income based on how many nights I would stay the night there. So this person was a good friend of the family. He actually lived right next door to us everywhere we moved, which now I know is for this specific reason. But it was my parents' way of saying that I was bringing in income. And one thing I want to mention is that this happened from the age of 5 to 11. So for 6 years of my life, I had to every weekend spend the night with this man. Now he had children of his own, so it did look like I was having sleepovers with his children. And I think that was my parents' way of not getting caught. Nights I would go over there, typically what would happen is it would be a play date. So I'd go over and I'd play with his daughter, I'd hang out with his son, and then eventually we'd all go to bed and we'd all sleep in the same room, because typically it was a 1-bedroom apartment that he lived in. So we'd all sleep in the same room, typically on the floor, and he would always sleep next to me. And I won't go into super detail, but unfortunately, there were a lot of aspects of my innocence that he did take by his choice. And it wasn't like a hangout, have this cute little girl on your arm type of situation. It was that he decided that he would take what I wanted to give away on my time. And unfortunately, this is something that I had endured, and it honestly only ended because he actually passed away. I do believe it would have went on until we were adopted. We moved to Michigan. We had some extended family members who actually took guardianship of us. So once we moved here, we actually saw the doctor for the first time. We went to the dentist, like the basic needs that you would think that we had before, we did not. And in that, I started to learn a lot of things about myself and about my body. And my parents, my adoptive parents, actually taught us the appropriate things for consent and your body parts and things like that. And I was around 14 when I actually learned that what had happened to me for 6 years was completely inappropriate and not normal. Because again, not words, not seeing doctors, not talking about it, not hearing about it, I thought it was completely normal as a kid. So it took a lot of healing, but I do still struggle with this. I mean, I still have night terrors, I still have those things. They're less now than they were before. I have an amazing significant other who supports me and understands everything about what I went through. And one thing I want to mention though is it took a long time for us to get to where we are, because growing up, you think, these are my parents. Like, I love these people so much. And these are the people who are supposed to love and protect me and show me what true love is. But they didn't. And so now I'm like, who's going to love me if even my parents didn't love me? I mean, the people who are supposed to love you the most chose to do that to you and give you up for adoption at the age of 13. And they didn't. So whoever would love me enough, I still struggle a little bit with feeling adequate. Even at work, there are times, and I get praised all the time, and I'm very thankful and very, very grateful for where I am. But there are times at work I feel very insecure. And, I have a bachelor's in sports medicine. I have a master's in business from Northwood University. I'm very intelligent, and I'm very grateful for that, because my 3 younger siblings were born addicted and had to go to detox. So I could have had other issues too, but I didn't. I still have things that are triggers that I've identified now that I just try to stay away from and not even indulge in. But I do also know the tactics to help myself stay from not getting an anxiety attack, or how to talk myself away from an anxiety attack based on, things going on in my life. So it is tough. I still have even some medical issues that I have to deal with because of the choices that were made on my behalf as a child. And that's just the reality. So one thing about me, I love kids. I think they're the greatest thing to ever happen to this world, and they deserve everything. They deserve a fighting chance, okay? And unfortunately, as I mentioned before, is that I do have some medical issues that I deal with. So I have complex PTSD, for example. It's where you experience multiple traumas for an extended period of time. So that's something that I deal with. It's something that I, work through on a daily basis. Another thing that I have is a couple of medical issues. So, for example, I have issues with losing weight, but I also have issues with infertility. And so because of the choices that man made, I have, excessive scar tissue buildup, but also have infertility issues. So being that I do love kids, everyone always asks me, why don't you have kids? Because you'd be so great. And I would be, and I know I would be, because I absolutely love them. And it's because the choices that someone made for me, that I could go through painful, repeated procedures to possibly have a child, but unfortunately, there's a high risk involved, and at my age, it's even harder. So it's unfortunate, again, that another person's choices in my younger years have impacted me as an adult. One time, we actually lived in a shelter, a family shelter in Illinois, and we actually ended up leaving there, ironically enough, because my parents did not like the rules that were set in place by the shelter, which is very unfortunate because the shelter answered all of the needs we had. And it was a safe, routine place that we knew we were going every day after school to this place. So, and as a child of abuse and neglect, having a stable home that you can constantly go back to, is going to be there, is so unique. And it's such an easy feeling having routine in our lives. But again, they had rules like a curfew and no drug usage, no drinking. So we actually ended up leaving and lived in our car. So 6 people, 2 adults and 4 children, lived in a tiny 4-door car. I found it interesting, and I actually started doing a lot of research in my healing journey. To now I'm 35 years old, and I'm very lucky. I see a great therapist. She specializes in trauma and trauma techniques. But one thing in my healing journey that was important to me was to do a lot of research and educate myself on sex trafficking. And I found it interesting that of the children who are trafficked, about 90 to 98% of them will know their trafficker. So that could be a family member, that could be a friend, that could be, someone that your parents grew up with, whatever that might look like. It's usually someone that they will know because they're comfortable around them. So it's easier to have your child go with this person and stay with this person. And I'm not saying that parents know about this, but familial trafficking is a huge issue, and it happens more often than people like to think. So unfortunately, that was 6 years of my life, but I have said this a time or two, I would have endured it to protect the 3 younger siblings that I have. The different types of traffickers and the different types of trafficking. So I want to talk about the fact that there's multiple different types of traffickers. So there's what we call the guerrilla trafficker. This is what you're going to see on movies and TV. This is the person who's going to kidnap you and run you across state lines, and you'll never be seen from again. That is actually very rare. That's one of the rarest forms of trafficking. There's familial trafficking, which is what happened to me. And that's when your parents or an aunt or an uncle or a cousin, sends you off and collects some sort of a money. There's also the CEO trafficker, which is going to be the one that has all the money, right? So it's going to be the person you're going to meet that can buy you all the fancy things, and you can stay at home and you don't have to work because they'll pay for everything, and the vacations and the this and the that. They're the ones who make you think that as long as you live with them and stay in their house and do the household duties, they'll take care of everything. When in reality, what happens is the minute you move in, they start sharing you with their friends and their friends' friends and so on and so forth. And the last one, which is actually the most common one, is going to be your Prince Charming trafficker. And this is the one that makes you fall in love with them. They're the one that you meet that you say, oh, your parents, they don't love you. I'll take care of you. Like, I'll buy you whatever you want. They give you all the compliments. They take you on fancy dinners. They take you to fancy places. And then they say, we should just move in and get married because I see myself spending the rest of my life with you. They're the love bombers, if you will. And those are the types that are the most dangerous because they actually make that person truly lose their identity by just falling in love with them. And the minute they move in, again, you start meeting their friends and their friends' friends, and you have to dress a certain way. And there's no more money. You might be able to sleep on clean sheets one night. That might be your reward for sleeping with all of their friends. You might get food, actually. There's a lot of signs that show with human trafficking victims that aren't monetary. So to ask, hey, have you had sex for money? That's so rare because there's usually never money given to the victim. It might be that they actually got a clean shower or new clothes, or that they were provided food for, food that they like. It could be that they were allowed to get their hair done. It's almost never actual exchange of money. So with trafficking, only about 2% actually get convicted unless they're caught in the act or the victim knows that this is something that should not be happening. They don't actually get convicted. It's very hard to provide enough proof and data and evidence that this is something that's going on. So it's very frustrating and also very unique that these victims come back and have to fight not only to get their identity back, fix their credit, and have their life back on track. They have to go through hours and days in the courtroom to possibly not even get a conviction. So the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about was actually the biggest impact in my life, and it was my 5th grade teacher. My 5th grade teacher saved our lives because honestly, without her, I don't know that I would have made it to 35. So I'm very grateful for every year that I turn. However, I never forget her. My fifth grade teacher was the one that spoke up. She's the one who called and had a discussion with the police. Where I went to school at that time, we had a lot of police officers in our school on a regular basis. So she was the one who talked to the police. She's the one who called CPS. She involved the school nurse. She is the one who made these eyes heavy on our family. And because of that, that's why the last time CPS got involved, it was, we weren't coming back. If they take us, we're not coming back. Again, thankfully, we had some extended family that felt upon their hearts to take in 4 children with a lot of issues. But without her noticing things and just talking to me, like when she'd notice I was quiet one day, she just came up and said, "You seem kind of quiet today. What's going on?" And we just talked about everything, and she didn't have any sort of like disgust or bad reaction. She just listened, and she would ask me questions about home and my brothers and sisters and things like that. And I just think about her all the time, because honestly, without her, I don't think I would have made it to 35. So this topic is very important to me. I think that kids deserve the world. They're the best, honestly. And they deserve a fighting chance. No kid should be born playing catch up like I was. So I'm very passionate about providing a safe and equal playing field for all children. But one thing I would say, because I hear this a lot from people, is that they don't know how to help, or they don't know what to say, or how to get involved. Well, here's the thing. It's not your job. It's not our jobs to investigate. Loop in the police. They are heavily trained in this. If you're a mandated reporter, call CPS. They're heavily trained in this. And if you're not sure, just ask questions. If this is a kid you spend a lot of time with, just ask them some questions. Kids are very open. But some signs that I like to point out to people is that it could be things like really bad fitting clothing, bruises in weird places. Those are the things you learn about, right? It can also be excessively touching their private areas. It could be that they're always hungry. It could be that they don't like going to the bathroom when other kids are in the bathroom. It could be that they're afraid of adults. These are all common things with a child from abuse. And I can tell you, because I lived it, still fighting for the life that I deserved as a child, but I didn't get. And I'm becoming the person that younger Melissa needed when she was a kid.
And be loved when we hold space for each other and offer grace, the world becomes a better place.